Ukraine. Anti-war protesters have gathered in cities around the world. Across Europe, thousands have taken to the streets of Amsterdam, Vienna, Warsaw and Florence, while a group of Russian protesters gathered outside the Russian embassy in Madrid. Hundreds more rallied in the Israeli capital of Tel Aviv, calling on the Russian president to end the war. There's also a large demonstration taking place here in Berlin today. DW's Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber is there. He joins me now. Ben, what's happening down there today?
There are thousands gathering here in central Berlin. Behind me you can see Berlin's victory column, and there's a stage with a few hundred people standing there, and others who are also where some speakers have been installed closer to Brandenburg Gate. These people started at Alexanderplatz, a central square in Berlin, and walked it down. There's now an event taking place here behind me with a few speakers calling for the end of Russia's aggression in Ukraine and also for a tougher stance by the German government.
Now, some of the people you've been chatting to there today, who are the people attending this demonstration and what are they demanding?
There are a lot of families, a lot of kids who are here flocking to the streets. There was another huge protest here in Berlin organized a few weeks ago. We all saw those images. According to the organizers, there were more than 500,000 people taking place. We don't have a number yet of how many are here on the streets of Berlin. We hear that there are thousands who are still waiting here and are not only demanding the end of Russia's war in Ukraine, but are also asking the government to take a tougher stance also when it comes to sanctions. We were able to talk to a few of the protesters who went out to the streets here in Berlin, and this is what they told us.
German politicians should use all the diplomatic options available, help the people here and help the people in Ukraine, and somehow try to influence Putin.
Our hands are tied militarily, but what we are doing now at least sends a signal, and I hope many other countries around the world will do the same.
I think we have to be ready to freeze a little. Gas and oil have to be wound down. It was a mistake to create so much dependence in the past.
I came as a refugee right now in Germany, in Ukraine, it was a better life. I used to live there, but right now you see how the things going on in Ukraine, and there's no reason to stay there.
Well, a very clear message from the protesters there, Ben. But it hasn't just been protests. There's also been a huge volunteer movement here in the city. Just give us a little bit of an idea about the aid efforts here in Berlin.
Totally, it's actually incredible to see the people, the number of volunteers who showed up, especially in Berlin's central station, where most of the trains bringing refugees arrive. According to Germany's Interior Ministry, more than 100,000 people fleeing the war in Ukraine have made it here to Germany's capital to then continue the trip to other German cities. And there are translators, people helping when it comes to accommodations. A lot of volunteers are offering the rooms for refugees fleeing the war, helping them when it comes to paperwork, for example, here in Germany, when it comes to food, when it comes to help also for their kids. Let's remember that they are traveling for hours or for days to flee that area, and there's a lot of solidarity. That's something that we've seen on the streets and also in the shelters and in the central station that's quite close to the place where we are right now. And this, of course, reminds us of what we also saw here in German cities, in several German cities, back in 2015 with the refugee crisis in Syria. So they pledged to have open arms to the refugees fleeing the crisis and also to welcome those who are still on their way to Germany.
All right, Benjamin, thank you. DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber. Well, the choir and orchestra of the Odessa Opera House in Ukraine gathered on Saturday to send a message of support and resistance through their music. They called for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, something NATO has so far ruled out. They said their concert was the only avenue they had to get their message across.
As sirens ring out across Ukraine, it was music that echoed through the streets of Odessa. Musicians and singers from the city's opera house gathered to make their voices heard. They're calling on NATO to close Ukraine's skies, the only way they know how. Conductor Igor Chernetsky says they must do whatever they can. Our profession is music. We must contribute to maintaining the patriotism of the people. That is why we present these compositions here. I don't know whether the airspace will be closed or not, but I hope that we will at least be heard. This is another reminder to the West. I hope it helps. This strategically important port city remains in Ukrainian control. But Odessa is braced for the fight. Many have already fled the city, seeking safety elsewhere. Lives left behind, families torn apart. The splendor of music in stark contrast to the signs of war. Singing for their city and survival in the hope that someone will hear.
You're watching DW News. Here's a recap of the main developments in the Ukraine war. Ukrainian officials say at least 35 people have been killed in Russian airstrikes on a military facility near Lviv in western Ukraine, near the border with Poland. Meanwhile, President Zelensky is warning that Russia intends to set up pro-Moscow pseudo-republics in occupied territories. That's your news update this hour. There'll be more news headlines at the top of the next hour. You can also get in-depth round-the-clock coverage of the war in